Hello, Captain. This is Wevoko. I've switched objectives and I am now focusing on patterns in American voting. First off, there appears to be two forms of political participation. Conventional political participation, which is activism that attempts to influence the political process through commonly accepted forms of persuasion, such as voting or letter writing, and unconventional political participation, which is activism that attempts to influence the political process through unusual or extreme measures, such as protests, boycotts, and picketing. Secondly, I've noticed some patterns in vote choices in these presidential elections. The first and most obvious pattern is that people vote mostly for the candidate of their political party. For example, a Republican voting for the Republican candidate, or vice versa. With this being said, however, there still exists the phenomenon of ticket splitting. This is the voting for candidates of different parties for various offices in the same election. Another principal factor in who people vote for is ideology. Liberals tend to favor governmental involvement and therefore tend to vote for Democrats, while conservatives believe in individualism and market-based competition and therefore tend to vote for Republicans. Moderates are in between and may vote differently each time. Another factor in vote choice is income and education. Generally, the poor vote Democratic and the wealthy vote Republican. Coupled with this is the amount of education. The most educated and least educated people tend to vote for Democrats, while those in the middle tend to vote Republican. Race and ethnicity also play a role in voting patterns. Whites tend to vote for Republican candidates, while African Americans vote heavily Democratic. Hispanics also vote mostly Democratic. Asian and Pacific Island Americans are more split, however. For example, Chinese Americans prefer Democrats, while Vietnamese Americans support Republicans. Gender also plays a role in vote choice. Generally, women are more likely to support Democrats and men Republicans. Religious groups also tend to have specific parties they prefer. Jewish voters prefer Democrats, while Protestant voters tend to vote Republican. Catholic voters are divided, but have begun to turn against their traditionally democratic ways and have voted more Republican. Finally, voters tend to reward the party in power during good economic times and punish the party in power during economic downturns. When this happens, people are using retrospective judgment, which is the voter's judgment on the party in power based on past performance on a particular issue. Other times, voters vote based on prospective judgment, or what the candidates say they're going to do. Those are all of the factors that I have identified that influence voter choice. I have also noticed several factors that affect voter turnout, or the proportion of the voting age public that casts a ballot. I have noticed that wealthy citizens are more likely to vote than poor ones. This could be because lower-income citizens may feel alienated from politics and feel hopeless. Similarly, people with more education tend to vote more frequently than those without. Race and ethnicity play a role in voter turnout as well. Whites tend to vote more often than African Americans, Hispanics, and other minority groups. This may be due to previous circumstances that prevented these minority groups to vote. Women today vote more than men and account for a majority of the electorate. And a much higher percentage of citizens over the age of 30 vote than do citizens under the age of 30. However, turnout decreases over the age of 70. Another factor in turnout is civic engagement. People who are members of unions, civic organizations, and trade and professional organizations are more likely to vote than people who aren't. These organizations emphasize community involvement, which often encourages voting. Finally, a person's interest in politics is a factor in voting. The most politically active Americans make up less than 5% of the country's population. Those who contribute time and money to a party or candidate make up 10% of the population. These numbers, although low, translate into millions of reliable votes. This concludes my report on American voting. Wevoko, offline.